I'm Leanne Ireland. I'm the Executive Director here at the Urban Society for Aboriginal Youth. I've been here almost 10 years now, and I'm super excited that we're going to have our 5th volume of the Blackfoot graphic novel, Thunder. As the Executive Director, I have lots of different roles here at the organization. Primarily, my roles are somewhat boring, and at times I do a lot of budgeting and funding applications and funding reports, but I also get to do really great fun stuff like engage Aboriginal youth in our different programs, engage all of our wonderful vendors and contractors to do different projects, especially like this one. And in terms of the Blackfoot graphic novel, I manage all of the funder responsibilities, all of the requirements that we have. I also make sure that the timing of the project works out well, and that all the different moving pieces are working together, and that it's approved by USAY, and we love what we're getting from the artists and from the different people involved. So yeah, I have lots of different diversity in terms of this project and what I do here. The Urban Society for Aboriginal Youth, or USAY, primarily focuses on helping urban Aboriginal youth in the city. We're a charitable organization, so we focus on youth 12 to 29 years old. And we have 3 major programming streams, staying in school and high school completion. And we know here in the city that sometimes the graduation rate is as low as 11%, but in our programs we've got to have about a 92% high school completion rate for kids that engage in our programs. And we also have 2 other programming streams, Arts and Action, which included our magazine New Tribe, and other different kinds of programs that have more of an arts-based focus. And then we have the 3rd programming stream, which is basically traditional knowledge or cultural programming. And we really focus in that area on traditional language and the promotion of multi-generational learning of languages and culture. And the Blackfoot graphic novel really fits into 2 of those major programming streams. We have the arts component, of course, with the documentary and obviously the art of the graphic novel, and then also, of course, the language aspect of it, and the multi-generational aspect of including elders and youth talking about language. So it's a great fit of combining lots of USAY's programming streams together into one great project. USAY could not do this work without the generosity and support of Canadian Heritage and the Government of Canada. We've been lucky to have their funding for the last 5 years to support this program, and truly we could not do it without them. The graphic novel came about in a really interesting way. We had conducted several focus groups with Aboriginal youth, like we've done throughout the years, and they suggested creating a graphic novel that kind of spoke to some of the issues and challenges they were facing in their community. It didn't seem like enough to us, as we were already producing a magazine, just to have a graphic novel. So we decided to take that to the next level, and we wanted to add this component of Blackfoot. And so that's kind of how this came to be, is that we took this concept that the youth had developed of a Blackfoot graphic novel and reinvented it to include this large Blackfoot component. And again, Blackfoot being oral history or an oral tradition, it wasn't enough just to have it be a Blackfoot graphic novel, but it also had to include an animation and a DVD and different ways of explaining how important multi-generational learning and learning of one's language is. And so that's sort of the history of how this project came to be, which is this really interesting way of taking a youth's idea and then elevating it to the next level. The reason we decided to choose Blackfoot as the language for the last 5 years has been because we know it's an endangered language. We're also in Treaty 7 territory, so it's really important to honor that Treaty 7 connection and to have Blackfoot be honored in that way. An endangered language means that there's 3,000 or less fluent speakers in our community right now, and we know many of them are elders or those that are maybe seniors, that might not consider themselves elders. And so we know that it's really important to start capturing their stories, capturing the language, encouraging multi-generational learning, the kind of this preservation almost, but more than preservation, really the encouragement of more fluent speakers and more learners. And by providing a contemporary story in a contemporary context and reinventing different stories in different ways, we can really encourage that learning to be something that is more than just language learning, more than just something that kids kind of want to get interested in or just know a couple phrases, but really want to engage with and become lifelong learners and fluent speakers of their language. So that's really why Blackfoot is so important for this project. It's really important to capture the Blackfoot language as well, because many elders talk about how important language is to understanding culture, and this intrinsic link between language and culture. If you don't understand your language, how can you possibly internalize or understand your own culture? And so that's a really important aspect of this as well, is taking stories and having them be captured in the Blackfoot language so that people understand culture where they're at now, but through language. The Blackfoot graphic novel is a super complex project, mostly because it has all of these different layers and components that most of our projects don't have. So it's a graphic novel, which is a publication aspect, it's a DVD, which is all these different moving parts, and then it's also the animation, which is taking that publication and animating it to voiceovers. And so you have elders, youth, staff, contracted staff, funders, community members, focus group youth participants. You just have all these different people trying to work together to create this project, and it's a lot of complexity and lots of layers. However you want to say it, it's a lot to coordinate. But we've been really lucky to have Brian be part of our team for the last 2 years, and he's really great at managing the artists and the youth component of it. And he's, of course, a super dynamic artist who's really interested in the project, and that brings out that interest and diversity and skills in those kids that we don't often get to do here as staff, because we're kind of focused on their barriers and some of the issues that they have in their own personal lives. But Brian focuses on the artwork of it, and that is really a great combination of skills. And he's also really respectful, and he honors the elders in a way that's really great. And again, it brings out these different layers of interest, as well as having these layers of complexity. And we don't often get that, where when projects are complex, they sometimes just seem complex. But in this case, it's very seamless, it works out well, and we're so lucky to have him, and we're so lucky to have the youth and elders that are involved. And despite the complexity, I think this project has turned out beautifully.
I'm Brian Batista. I'm the artistic director on this year's Blackfoot graphic novel Thunder, as well as last year's graphic novel Creator. So the art director has the enormous task of getting together all the elements for this project. In our graphic novel, we're not just print book, but we also have a DVD at the back. And the DVD gives you the chance to listen to the language of Blackfoot, which is mostly an oral tradition. So I oversee the creation of all materials. The editing, the layout, the DVD, the animation creation, and then getting all that to go to the various parties that print either the DVD or the graphic novel. So this year, once we got the go-ahead from Leanne to get the story created, got a hold of Randy, who worked with us last year, and booked him to come in and tell our youth contributors as a large group a story that had been handed down to him about the thunder pipe and why we have that ceremony. Once that story was created, I transcribe it, send it back to Randy. He goes over and edits it and makes sure that the English version is what he wants it to say, so it conveys the story properly. Then we go through the process of getting the Blackfoot translated, and it comes back to me. I now have 2 stories essentially, and I have the story laid out by a page-by-page organization, so I can assign the artist the artwork that they're responsible for per page. This year I wanted the artist to really have a chance to take it out of the realm of the graphic novel and make it their own by having each page be one completed and one holistic artwork, representative by 1 or 2 sentences from the story. When I hire the artist, the first thing they do after we read the story together and talk about what the overall look is like, I gather some examples so they kind of get an idea of the feel we want. In this book this year, we had kind of washed out watercolory edges, which gave for a really nice, almost like a children's book. At first they sketch pencil and paper the old-fashioned way, and then we kind of get the design of the character in which to move forward. They draw initial sketches. They scan those sketches into Photoshop. They put the sketches as a layer underneath, and then they sketch on top with a variety of Photoshop brushes that I provided them with. These are colored in Photoshop, but the most important thing is the foreground and background elements and characters all need to be separate layers in Photoshop, so that when I do the layout, I can move, adjust scale, change the whole composition of the elements. Afterwards, I take those files, and those need to go to animation. By having each file piece as a separate layer, they can be put into After Effects, and they can be stretched into Z-space or depth. And so foreground layers can come forward in the picture plane, background layers can be sent back, and then we can take what would be a digital camera and move it through. And that gives more motion graphic illusion for the animation portion as we fly through the artwork. If the art was just a flat piece of artwork, we wouldn't be able to really animate it at all. Those files come back to me. I do the layout in Adobe InDesign, and I add the text, the Blackfoot on the top, the English on the bottom, and I do all the page layouts and make them suitable to go to a printing press. We send them to our printer. The printer then converts that and prints out a proof, which I then have a look at if the color is right, if the cut's right, if the everything looks good, if I've got the pages right, if I've made any mistakes. It gets okayed, they go to print. At the same time, we're doing the media. So we take their files, we put them into After Effects, and we do a motion graphic animation. We record the Blackfoot audio and set it to time and pacing, because Blackfoot is an oral tradition. You need to hear it more so than just read it. So you can take the book, you can put the DVD in, and you can read along and hear how the traditional Blackfoot is spoken as you read through the book. And that then goes to DVD with this doc. It goes to be okayed by Leanne at USAY. When that comes back, we send that off to a separate printing place. Those two elements, printed book, printed DVD, are put together, and then once we have all those, we get thousands of copies shipped in boxes, ready to go and to disseminate to the public.
We've been working with Randy, this great Blackfoot elder in our community, for the last 2 years. And last year he suggested that maybe the best way to stay authentic to the Blackfoot language was to start with a Blackfoot story and then translate it into English. And really this project is about being authentic to the Blackfoot language, not being authentic to the English language. And so we really took that to heart, and what we did was we brought in a group of Aboriginal youth and we had them listen to the story, this more traditional Aboriginal story, and we asked them, is this what you guys picture as the Blackfoot graphic novel this year? And what we heard back was this resounding yes, that they wanted something that was more traditional, that was more reflective of culture, that was more reflective of being a Blackfoot person, and that you were also learning the language but at the same time learning a traditional story. And they really liked that element of it. In the past we've done more of these more urban contemporary stories, which have been fantastic, but in this case I think it really promotes a Blackfoot story and a Blackfoot history that is going to be unique to this project. So obviously this project doesn't happen without lots of different team players, different people that have different roles in the project, and we're so lucky to have Randy. He's been such a great asset to the project, but it's also important not to underestimate his wife and partner, Anita. She is a very powerful woman leader in our community, and she speaks and writes Blackfoot, and that's really important because she was the main translator for the written parts that you see in the graphic novel. And what's great is that they're this really dynamic team, and in traditional Aboriginal culture it's all about having a balance between the female and male aspects in our community and the strengths that we each bring to different projects. And I think that that's really highlighted with their partnership, because he speaks the language and he's this dynamic youth leader, and she writes the language and speaks the language, and she's also a dynamic youth leader, but they bring different roles and different strengths to the project, and that's been really powerful and meaningful to the project as well. So we're just really lucky to have them as this great team and this duo working with us. It's really important that people understand that there's this wonderful DVD attached to the Blackfoot graphic novel. I have this fear that it's often overlooked, and ultimately we want to have people hear the language and just absorb it into their soul and absorb it into who they are, and have it be part of them, because Blackfoot is really a language that needs to be heard. And I think that's the best part of this project is the DVD and the animation and that aspect of it. The artwork is beautiful, and the art that the kids put together is magnificent, and each of those individual pages are beautiful. But ultimately, we want people to hear the language and care about it and just absorb it. And so really trying to push the DVD this year and really promote it. And so that's the biggest part of this project. Thanks to the generosity of Canadian Heritage, all the copies of the Blackfoot graphic novel and included DVD are completely free. That means you can get them at community agencies, at schools, and especially at USAY. All you need to do is call our office or connect on our website, and you can get a free copy today.